Hello and welcome everyone to Soul Filling Our Sisters, SOS Saturdays. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Laura Crandon. I am the founder and president of Touch for Life. It is a pleasure to be here. We have such a fabulous lineup today. I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. I'll be your moderator today, and we have three fantastic panelists. We want to make sure this is interactive. This is a session for you, so you can ask questions of these experts that we've assembled. I'll start by, again, talking a little bit about my journey. So I founded Touch for Life out of my own journey with breast cancer that started in 2016 and has continued to this day. And the focus of Touch for Life is really for you to make sure that you're engaged, empowered, and educated around topics for your health, your total well-being, and you understand the risk factors for breast cancer. Some of the things that I didn't understand when I was going through the thick of my journey. I want to make sure that the community, our community, this safe community, gets that kind of information. I've been a health plan executive for 15 years. I've also been an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, run products, serve on a gubernatorial board, and do a lot of public speaking around the topic of Black women and health and the disparities that we face. So it's my pleasure to be your moderator today. From an education perspective, I have a degree, a master's degree in business from Duke University, and an undergraduate degree, a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of Maryland. And I was most recently appointed to their Board of Governors for the Alumni Association, which again is an honor for me. Today, we're going to be talking about beauty secrets. And as you know, we start Touch for Life off with a little bit of an icebreaker. So it's an opportunity for you to weigh in. It's July this time, and so it's almost July, and that's prime for cookout time. It's prime for family reunions. And so the question for today that we're going to start off with is, what is your favorite cookout food? You can put it in the chat or come off mute. What's your favorite cookout food? Corn on the cob. Okay, great, great. I have to go with potato salad myself. Love that. Oh, grilled pineapples. That sounds great. Fantastic. Anyone? Oh, two for corn. Okay, great. Ribs. Oh, I know. Yeah, those are great. Delicious. And I gotta say, Texas or North Carolina, there's chicken. Great. Thank you, Ida. Fantastic. All right, that's making me hungry. Great, thanks for participating in our cookout food. Sounds really good. So it looks like a lot of places I need to go and visit and get the food that you're cooking, particularly because I'm not a very good cook myself. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna next start with our first segment, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today. Remember that for today, what we do is we also do giveaways at the end. So make sure you stay to the end because we select someone to receive a special gift. And of course, we want to thank the sponsors who've made this possible. Myriad Genetics, Hologics, High Impact Partners, and the Vassar Center. We're really appreciative that we're able to bring this type of programming to you. Let me introduce you to Dr. Tracy Bethea. She's Assistant Professor of Oncology at the Office of Minority Health and Health Disparities Research and Cancer Prevention and Control at Georgetown Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center, right down the street from where I am, there in Washington, D.C. She's going to be presenting to us on a short introduction of epigenetics and breast cancer. We'll talk about that in a second. Let me tell you about her fantastic credentials. So Dr. Bethea focuses her research on chemical and non-chemical stressors underlying cancer health disparities affecting Black women, with a particular focus on estrogen receptor negative breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Her current work continues research on breast cancer subtypes in African American women and also examines risk factors for ovarian cancer and for sleep disturbances. Her research on modifiable factors in breast cancer survivorship is supported by a Career Development Award from the National Cancer Institute. New research directions involve the study of environmental and social factors as predictors of health disparities in cancer incidence and survivorship, and aims to bridge the gap between the biologic, individual, and macro environmental levels. Dr. Bethea received a PhD in environmental health from Boston University School of Public Health and completed postdoctoral training in cancer epidemiology with the Black Women's Health Study at the Sloan Epidemiology Center at Boston University. I first met Dr. Bethea because she presented to a group of advocates the research that she's working on, specifically around Black women and environmental factors that I will ask her about in a minute. I'd like to first welcome you, Dr. Bethea, and start with a question of what made you get into the profession you're in?
It's a really long story. I don't have time for all of that, but I think I just kind of made observations about the world, about my family, about my community, and also had a lot of support from, teachers and faculty who were like, you have questions and you want to answer them, and the best way to do that in partnership with community is if you're the scientist, if you're the researcher, if you have the opportunity to build relationships and figure out respectful ways to answer those questions. And that's how I kind of got into the research side, whereas I had been kind of training in policy, thinking that I would go try to influence society in that way.
That's fantastic. Your research is so needed and your voice is so needed, and that you get to focus on us is fantastic. So take it away and lead us through your presentation, giving us some foundational information about this big, long word, epigenetics and breast cancer.
Are you going to pull up my slides, or am I sharing?
Yes, our moderator, we will advance the slides. If you say next slide, it will advance.
Okay. So next slide.
Laura, sorry, but the deck I have does not have Dr. Bethea's slides in it.
Dr. Bethea's slides? Okay, well, we'll just pause one moment while we correct that.
No problem. But I do definitely appreciate the invitation in the area of cancer research, and also in the area of environmental research. There's not a lot of us. So it's always a privilege to get to share what I'm doing with us. And one of the things that when I connected with Laura is that I'm also a 2-time breast cancer survivor, early stage, thankfully, but it's changed the way that I do my work and the lens that I bring to my work, and I think it's made me a better scientist. And although I'm not an advocate, it's also made me much more appreciative of advocates and survivors that I engage in my work.
Thank you so much. Let me see if I can bring your slides up, Dr. Bethea, so we make sure.
The participant screen sharing is disabled, so I can't do it for you.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
No
Would you prefer to share your own slides? That may be easier, Laura.
Okay,
Just
sure.
allow her to share. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And give her sharing rights because I'm not host.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
You should be able to share your slides now, Dr. Bethea.
Awesome. Okay, how does that look for everyone?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Okay, super. So today I'm gonna kind of cram in a lot of things into about 10, 15 minutes. I'm gonna do my best to be clear and stay on time to talk about epigenetics and breast cancer. And so the image that you see here is that kind of DNA double helix that we often see that contains the genetic information that produces us, right? And that whole process by which we create proteins that are used to support the cells and the processes in our bodies start with this DNA. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, how that whole process works is that our DNA, basically those two strands, they come apart, and RNA, ribonucleic acid, kind of reads that material, those orders of letters, and then turns those into proteins, and into amino acids. Those amino acids build proteins, and those proteins are really the foundation of life. And so what we're going to be talking today is kind of based on that genetics, and we're adding a piece to it. And so epigenetics itself is the study of how that DNA works, right? How it's read into eventually amino acids and proteins, and how there are changes in that process without changes in the actual DNA sequence. So those letters that give the almost like the recipe for life, no change in the letters, but the change in what's read from the letters and what's produced. It's like if I was reading a book and it said CAT, but for some reason I miss a letter, and then I don't understand what the sentence is saying, and I make up something that kind of makes sense, and I come away with a different understanding. It's kind of a similar thing genetically. And this is something that does often happen normally, right? We can have identical twins where their DNA is exactly the same, but they can have very different, they can have different fingerprints, they can look different, they can have different interests, right? They're not exactly the same person. And sometimes that's due to epigenetics, due to different changes that alter how their DNA turns into their hair color or their fingerprint or their height. And so what you see here in this triangle are some of the primary ways that we understand epigenetic mechanisms affecting how our DNA turns on or turns off, how it's expressed, kind of goes through that process into becoming amino acids and proteins. And what you see at the top is one of the most well-researched mechanisms, which is DNA methylation. And a methyl group is a compound that kind of gets attached to the DNA, like you see the little red dots, the red circles. And that affects whether the DNA kind of opens and gets read or whether it doesn't. So it can affect which genes and which sequences in a gene can be read and then transcribed, turned into proteins, amino acids and proteins. So what you see on the bottom left are histone modifications. And what histones are these kind of chunks of proteins that provide the structural support for the whole chromosome. And so DNA, every cell has about 6 feet of DNA. And so cells are really, really tiny. And so they have to be so tightly packed to fit all of that inside of us because we have millions of cells. And so the histones help wrap that around tightly. But the histones have to kind of unwrap and loosen, which we think of as kind of opening, in order for the DNA to be read, that transcription into proteins to occur. If the histones stay tightly closed, then the DNA can't be read because it's kind of protected. So if there are things that change how the histones are arranged, they can change how the DNA is or is not read, whether it's expressed, which is what we're talking about in the middle. And on the bottom right is what we see as what are known as non-coding RNAs. So those are RNAs that I mentioned before, but they are RNAs that don't get turned into proteins. So they have different functions. One of the things they can do is, again, affect gene expression. They can affect whether the gene is kind of on or off, whether it turns into amino acids, read into amino acids and proteins or not. So that's kind of a quick, what are epigenetics? What are some of the things that we know so far about epigenetics and how our body functions? And so even though these changes don't affect the letters that are our DNA, that is our building block, our recipe, they can be inheritable. One of the good things is that many of these epigenetic changes are considered to be reversible. So if it's a change that could harm health, it may be a change that's reversible. On the other hand, if it's a change that could help health, it could be reversible. So it's really important, even though we're at an early part of understanding, in some ways, although there's lots of research in this area, it's thinking about, well, what are these changes that are affecting our lives on a very basic level, and how do we understand how they may be related to health in both positive and possibly negative ways. So what causes these changes? What you see here on the left is what's considered the exposome. It's all of the things that are in our lives that can affect our health, affect our bodies. And so there are things here like smoking and healthy diet, stress, finances, exposure to radiation. There are all kinds of things that can lead to epigenetic changes that can be positive or negative. And so we want to think about it as like a body of experiences as opposed to one thing and one thing only. We also learned that epigenetic changes can occur across your lifespan. And what you see on the right, as a young lady kind of going from being in utero as a baby all the way out through being elderly, and at different places in our lives, different times, we can have epigenetic changes. But as our body changes and as our life transitions, we're also using different genes to do different things, right? As, for example, we're talking about breast cancer today, and the breast development happens in stages. There's some things that happen in the womb, right? Some things that happen during puberty, some things that happen during pregnancy and lactation, some things that happen during menopause. And so there are different epigenetic changes that could be impactful across that process. There could also be epigenetic changes that will have no effect on health because that gene may not be used, or that portion of the gene may not be used at that time. For example, our eye color doesn't change across the lifespan. So if there's an epigenetic change to that gene that codes for eye color, it may not have an influence on our health, or it may be related to a different gene that could influence our health. So it's a very complex picture, but it's one that could be important for thinking about cancer risk across the cancer continuum. And so what you see here is the cancer continuum that's presented by the National Cancer Institute to help us really think about how the different pieces of the cancer experience and our understanding of cancer fit together. So we use this kind of as a way to think through some of the ways in which epigenetic changes could affect breast cancer risk. So let's start with etiology, and that's really the study of what causes an outcome. And so here, what causes breast cancer? And epigenetic changes can influence how our body reacts, or how our body reacts to certain factors. For example, as already mentioned, I do work in environmental exposures, and there are some environmental exposures that are related to higher levels of DNA methylation. And so if that methylation occurs in a pathway that affects cancer risk, right? If it affects how a cell replicates, because cancer, particularly invasive cancer, kind of loses the ability to control how it replicates, control its size of growth, its rate of growth, gains, in some cases, the ability to escape our immune system. And those are things that are happening at the genetic level that can be influenced by epigenetic changes. whether those changes are from environmental exposures like air pollution, or even certain medications, infections, or health behaviors like cigarette smoking. It can also affect prevention. So we know that in some cases, epigenetic changes, the levels can be reduced when someone, over the course of time after someone quits smoking. You know, with a healthier diet, there are more helpful epigenetic changes. Physical activity can also help reduce the amount of potentially harmful epigenetic changes. Protection from the sun can prevent some epigenetic changes due to UV exposure, etc. So there's also kind of a place there, not just for things that can increase risk of cancer, but also processes, epigenetic processes that can decrease risk of cancer. But on the other side, there's also a place of treatment. Many of our current cancer treatments do seek to affect processes at the cellular and even DNA level. So if an epigenetic change, particularly like those histones, if they don't come apart, then that gene, that DNA that may be targeted by a medication, a treatment, may not be able to reach where it needs to have the most effect. If epigenetic changes are affecting the cellular metabolism, making it resilient or making it able to use different sources for energy, then our treatments may be less effective. On the other hand, if there are epigenetic changes that may be helpful, then they could increase the efficacy of a particular treatment, make it more helpful, more successful. It could also make it possibly less painful, right? If the body is reacting and the epigenetic changes make it easier for the body to process some of the treatments, perhaps to make them less toxic because of the transformation of the compounds inside of the body. So the last step I'll talk about is survivorship. And this is someone's journey throughout the process. The National Cancer Institute considers someone to be a survivor from the point of diagnosis throughout the end of their life course. So here, again, someone's body changes. Many people have changes in their metabolism, changes in different body parts, changes in energy, etc., after and during cancer treatment. So that can be a place as well where there can be epigenetic changes that can influence how people live and their health. Many cancer survivors also make changes after their cancer diagnosis. Some people become, more physically active, healthier diets. Some people choose different ways to manage their stress. And so during that journey, those changes in exposures, changes in behaviors can also affect their health for better. If they're changes that reduce harmful epigenetic changes, or for worse. Some people do also have other challenges in terms of responding to a cancer diagnosis. So there's kind of a link between some of the etiology and prevention associated with cancer risk, as well as some of those same factors affecting epigenetic changes that can affect someone's survivorship journey. So that was kind of a lot to blow through, but just to kind of summarize, here you see kind of this life course approach again, starting when the DNA and the chromosomes are formed before we're born, and how it all wraps together with those histones and that process of cells dividing and replicating, starting from the very beginning of our existence. And in the middle, you see how some of these lifestyle factors, like I mentioned, physical activity, cigarette smoking, diet, as well as environmental exposures and stressors can influence epigenetic regulation, influence how that recipe for life is turned into actual amino acids and proteins that create cells, as well as all the kind of bio things that help us function properly. And those processes, those influences are happening all the way throughout our lives. And some of them can also be passed on to the next generation. And that's what you see in the column on the right, where it kind of processed through that and then suggests that there could be different susceptibility to cancer risk or different susceptibility to cancer outcomes, prognosis, survival, response to treatment because of these kind of biologic processes. And here, I will point out that different susceptibility and disparate disease outcomes doesn't necessarily mean negative. It could be positive if those changes make the body more efficient, make the body healthier, or help reduce some of those risk factors for disease across the life course. So I know that was a lot. I'm trying to keep 15 minutes. So thank you so much for your attention. And I'll be happy to take questions or to talk about my work in more detail whenever we get there. Thank you.
We're first going to ask if there are questions. Thank you so much. That's really interesting, particularly because we heard a lot about RNA during the pandemic with some of the vaccines and kind of understanding how those things work together and impact that. I'll first ask if there are questions from the audience. Okay, seeing none immediately, I would like to ask you about your research. You talked about answering some questions. Tell us about some of those questions that you're trying to answer, and then how we might help or participate or know about more of those, because they are focused on Black women.
Yeah, I have lots of questions. But some of the things that I'm really super excited about right now is that there's been a lot of research into environmental exposures and cancer risk. And almost all of those studies, cancer patients and survivors are excluded. So we don't really know how environmental exposures are affecting health among survivors. And many survivors would like to know, are there changes that I should make in my life that would help me live healthier? Many of the chemicals that people are exposed to on a regular basis, some through products, some without their consent, right? We don't really know if it affects cancer survivors differently due to some of the changes related with cancer and cancer treatments. We don't really know if some survivors may be more susceptible to things like, wildfires and heat and ozone pollution, air pollution days. And we should know. We should be able to give people, providers, and also policymakers the information to make sure that people are protected or have the option of protecting themselves as much as possible. So that's one of the main things I'm working on now. What are survivors exposed to? What kind of products are people using? Where are people living? And how might that influence their health? Especially how might that influence people's cognitive function over time, as well as pain, fatigue. I'm also doing some work looking at sleep and sleep interventions among Black women with cancer. Because it's hard, right? It's like you get diagnosed, like, well, eat better, work out, sleep better. It's like if I had time to do all of those things, I'd have done them before I got diagnosed. And now you're adding more things to my life. But everybody wants to sleep better, and sometimes it seems, in talking with survivors and advocates, is that keeping up with lifestyle changes can be really hard, especially after a clinical trial has ended. But sleep seems to be something that once someone starts to feel better, if it's kind of small changes over time, it's something that people can commit to or can come back to. And it seems to also be something that will give someone more kind of bang for their buck, right? We function better when we sleep better. We talk, we engage with other people better. We feel like we make clearer decisions. It can also be less pain, less depression, less fatigue, possibly, more energy to engage in exercise. So it might be a useful lever that people actually want to do without being stigmatized for not already doing better. And so that's something I'm working on, trying to get some work done in that for Black women, but also for Black men as well, who have often been left out of clinical trials and disparities research beyond risk.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Are there ways that if people are interested in participating, because not all clinical trials take blood and tissue samples, it sounds like this might be an observational one. Are there, and certainly feel free to share with us if there are opportunities to participate in these clinical trials. We'd like to know.
I would love to. Right now, I'm not recruiting, but when I get there, I'll definitely share that info with you. Also, if there are opportunities for people who are really, excited to give their input, share their opinions, as I kind of work on things and refine interventions, I would be happy to connect with someone, kind of add them as almost like an advisory group, like how Laura and I got connected. And to kind of make sure that the work that I'm doing is useful. It's great to, get grants and publish papers, but I'm not here just to, have a career and get promoted. I really want to do work that matters and that can help people make the choices that they feel are best for themselves and their families. And so that is that's another opportunity as well.
Wow, that's mic dropping right there. Thank you so much. I'll ask any more questions either in the chat or you can come off mute.
I know it was a lot.
It's okay. It's really, really impactful. Okay, thank you so much. Oh,
I have a
yes,
question.
please.
Hi, my name is Andrea Bagwell, and I am a breast cancer survivor since 2009. Praise God.
Awesome.
And recently, I have two children, a son and a daughter. My son is 36 and my daughter is 32. And recently, with this year, my daughter did through her primary care doctor, a referral for what's the word, like a DNA test to see if she was she could possibly get cancer in her lifetime. I can't think of the scientific word right now for that kind of look. And
probably a polygenetic risk score, looking at her genetics.
Yes, absolutely. And what they did, at least from the primary care doctor, they kind of put her in a high risk category. What I understood that meant was, okay, you're only 33, but maybe you should start getting mammograms now, and my son, you're 35 at the time, but maybe you should get more, screenings. And it seems like that would be really helpful for like lots of families to know about. I mean, just trying to get your thought on that. And because in our family, like I said, I'm a breast cancer survivor since 2009, and their father died of colon cancer in 2008. Yeah, so you have it on both sides of the family, which is how they said, hey, you should be in this high risk group. Just wanted to get some thoughts or feedback on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I've done some research a few years ago where we looked at risk of breast cancer, family history of other cancers, and risk of breast cancer, particularly breast cancer overall, but also by subtype, estrogen receptor positive, estrogen receptor negative, and triple negative. And we did find that family history of certain types of cancer, breast plus certain other cancers, as well as some non-breast cancers in the family, was associated with increased risk. And it wasn't always the same pattern across subtypes. So I think it's important for when someone has a family member, especially a family member who's been diagnosed with a cancer before age 50, to get genetic testing. Not all insurance will cover that. And some people will go to kind of direct to consumer testing companies if they aren't able to get it through their clinician, which kind of has its own weaknesses and challenges because of the population that they're drawing from. I think anyone with a family history, particularly of more than one cancer, as in your family, and an early cancer before age 50, should talk to their doctor or primary care provider, if they have an NP or a PA, someone they're comfortable talking about medical things with, and talk about what are some of the ways to reduce risk. So even if you're not able to get a genetic screen to see, are you at higher than average risk, or if you're at higher risk for a hereditary breast cancer. Most breast cancers are sporadic, meaning they're not hereditary. For us, there really aren't enough of us in genetic research for them to say, yes, you have, this is what this means. In some cases, beyond BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, oftentimes when we get genetic screening, we'll have variants of unknown significance. So there isn't enough data to say whether we're at increased risk or at lower risk, but there is enough information to meet with a provider and say, I'm concerned about, I have family history, I'm concerned about my cancer risk. What are my options to decrease my risk? Can we talk about what's feasible? So if the health plan will cover earlier screening, what does that look like? For many of us, mammograms are better than nothing, but we might need more than that. We might need a mammogram. And then if we have more dense breasts, then we might also need to figure out work in breast ultrasounds, breast MRIs, so we can catch small things early, particularly if they may be estrogen receptor negative or triple negative cancers, where we need to catch them as early as possible, because the treatment options there aren't as many treatment options. And it's difficult, many of the options that are available for triple negative cancers. So I think it's awesome, and I'm so glad that she's doing that. I think it's also important, as Laura was saying, going into barbecue and family reunion season, to talk about cancer screening, talk about cancer risk in the family. It's not always comfortable, and a lot of people are like, that's my personal business. My body is my business, which is fine. But to get it on people's radars and say, well, you need to find out if your insurance will cover this. If you have financial bandwidth, you might want to see if you can maybe make up the difference or get an early screening anyway. The age of diagnosis for colorectal cancer is going down, so young people need to be a part of the conversation. So I'll stop talking, but those are my—
Yeah, that was great. I just want to say this is a great discussion. This is exactly where Touch for Life is focused, what we call the biomarkers, both genetic and genomic testing. I want to applaud you, Andrea. I want to applaud that physician, okay? Because what we're finding is not all physicians are taking the steps that your daughter's physician is taking. I just hug that person. First, one, health history is so important. And coming from the insurance industry, as I have, what's really important is that you get your health history and you share it with your physician, and that your physician, every physician that you see, has that family history and is noted in your medical record, because that then puts you in the category that your daughter has been put in high risk, which makes it more likely that the insurance will in fact cover it. Being seen by a high-risk breast center is fantastic. In fact, Touch for Life will be publishing a nationwide database of high-risk breast centers, because that doesn't exist. Means that you just watched more closely. It means that you'll have more options, as Dr. Bethay said. It doesn't mean that you're definitely going to develop cancer, but if anything unusual develops, you might be screened every 3 months, whereas the average person is every 6, or you might be screened every 6, whereas the average person is every year. You will get additional testing, something that I didn't get and I should have had when I went through my journey, because I had the very dense breast. So I applaud you. The first step is health history, and then the monitoring just means that you're monitored, and they're just keeping an eye out for things.
There's also
the other
providers with certain types of expertise.
Yes.
Who are used to looking at high-risk patients, so they're looking with a particular eye, which is important for us.
Yes, and it gives your daughter options. For example, we had a guest on who had a similar history and chose to take prophylactic efforts of preserving eggs, as an example, to make sure because she was interested in having children, that sort of thing. It gives you the option because you now have the knowledge. The other connection I want to make sure we're making is prostate cancer and breast cancer. There have been studies that show that they can be connected. And it's so great that you mentioned your son, because A lot of folks don't realize when mom has breast cancer, remember you inherit half your DNA from your mom and half from your dad. Of course, I'm not the doctor, but Dr. Bethea is. And so there does become a risk for your sons, right? Sons, grandchildren, et cetera, to inherit certain risks because it's certain DNA and mutations because the dad had prostate cancer as an example, or the mom had breast cancer. Each child could be at risk. So I applaud you. And please tell as many people as you can the experience that you and your daughter have had, because more of us need to have the experience that you're having. Thank you. Sorry, I get so passionate about that. Any other questions before we move on to our next segment?
Hi, this is Barbara. I'm so glad to be here to talk to Dr. Bethea. I have a very unique situation. I come from a family of a lot of siblings. I'm one of 13 children, and 10 of us have had cancer. I'm one of 3 who is asymptomatic. I just don't know what to think of this. And it's not the same cancer. It's a broad spectrum. I mean, we've got breast cancer, uterine cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, leukemia, multiple myeloma. I mean, it just goes on and on. Breast cancer. So I just feel like I'm a sitting duck. I did have a body scan. I don't know if that's the same thing that you're talking about. Yeah, because it didn't really help. It didn't show any cancer. It showed I have an enlarged uterus because of fibroids. That's about all, all I have. So I don't know what to do, or just don't do it and just keep it in God's hands. I just, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that that is in your family, and I hope you're all able to huddle and support each other. And so you can always put it in God's hands, but we can also be co-laborers with Christ, right?
Mhm.
So I would say whatever, I'm not a clinical doctor, but I would say whatever kind of screenings your doctors recommend. I say also in your family, telling your stories is important.
Mhm.
For some of the kind of genetic risk factors that we think of, like BRCA1, BRCA2 for breast cancer, there are also genetic syndromes, one being Lynch syndrome, Li-Fraumeni syndrome, Fanconi syndrome, where there are multiple genes that have alterations that can increase risk. So when there's a family that has a lot of cancer diagnoses, then the members of the family should be tested for one of these syndromes to make sure that it's not a whole group of genes that are increasing risk. The important thing about syndromes is that they increase risk for more than one cancer. So the screening approach clinically should be different, which might be why you had a body scan, probably a PET scan. And so I would say also that's a lot to carry.
Yeah.
Whatever, and we may talk about this later, but whatever helps you feel less stress, whatever helps you feel that there are things that are in your control, whatever kind of makes you mindful of your value and the necessity for your voice and your existence are things that will help you be healthier. And I don't say just mentally, but because stress affects our immune function, stress affects our inflammation, stress affects our bodies. So things that help you process stress, help you stay engaged socially, mentally, spiritually, are things that will be healthier for you physically. But also, tell the young people in your family about these risks, so they can also not just think about screening, but also think about their behaviors, right? In a family where there are several cancers, you don't want people smoking. You want to encourage them to stop smoking. You want to encourage them not to start smoking or vaping or anything like that. You want to encourage them to enjoy the barbecue, but don't eat like that every day, right? You want to encourage them to figure out what way they like to move, depending on where you live. I'm from North Carolina. You don't just You didn't just go out and run in the summer. It was hot, right?
Mhm.
But however they like to move. And if there are young people who like their pickup basketball games, you encourage them to keep doing that. Just kind of finding their thing, and also encouraging them to connect with what is important to them, what helps them feel value in their space in the place that is life, that will help nourish them, to be holistically healthy. There may be some people who are diagnosed, and so whoever in your family is comfortable sharing their experience, being a support. I think a lot of people don't have those family connections now that we used to have, and they're so important. So if there's a way to nurture those as well. So
Yeah.
not maybe a useful clinical
Thank you so
response,
much.
but
We will have to move
Yeah.
on to our next segment. I do thank you, Barbara, for sharing. If you have some further questions, certainly reach out to us at hello@touchforlife.org. It's an opportunity perhaps to connect you with some additional resources, either some researchers and or geneticists that might be able to answer more of your questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. With that, we're going to move to our next segment. And I get the pleasure of introducing a friend, a sister friend, and a regular here at SOS Saturdays. As you know, that part of our approach is to make sure that you have practical tools and you walk away with things that you can do to impact your health directly. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Kim Michelle Sterrett. She's a registered yoga teacher with Yoga Alliance. She began practicing yoga in 2015 as a way to heal her mind, body, and spirit. There's a story there. And after experiencing many positive changes, she wanted to teach others to find the same healing. That sounds familiar. Teaching body positive yoga, that's good for me. Good news for me, my body positivity, and encouraging people of all ages with all body types to participate in yoga is indeed her passion. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Kim Michelle Sterrett. Thank you.
Namaste, everybody. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dr. Bethea. I want to first start with some breathing exercises to help reduce one of those risk factors, the stress. So if you want to sit down in your chair, we'll stand later. So we're going to think about bringing breath to 3 places: our belly, our ribs, and our chest. So let's find some grounding. If you're in your seat, move around and root your sit bones so you can feel them, maybe pull out some flesh. You can have your hands rest first on your thighs, then we'll move them to our belly. Think about elongating the spine, having the crown of your head reaching up toward the sky. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. If not, you can always lower your gaze. And so we're gonna inhale and expand the belly. So now's the time that we can put the hands on the belly. Inhale, fill the belly with air. Exhale, let the belly fall. Belly button comes in toward the spine. Inhale, fill the belly with air. Exhale, let the belly fall. Inhale. Exhale. Now this time we'll inhale with the belly. Now inhale with the ribs. Exhale the ribs. Exhale the belly. So we have 2 places to fill. Inhale, filling the belly. Suck in a little more air. Inhale, filling the ribs. Exhale, the ribs, the belly. One more time. Inhale, filling the belly, the ribs. Exhale, the ribs, the belly. Now we're gonna add the chest. So inhale, filling the belly, the ribs, the chest. Exhale, the chest, the ribs, the belly. Inhale with the belly, the ribs, the chest. Exhale, the chest, the ribs, the belly. Alrighty, blink open your eyes. That is called breathing with 3-part breath. And when you inhale in these 3 different areas, it lowers the stress. So this segment is called I Am Beautiful. So we're gonna think about different areas of our body that we're gonna be grateful for and think about their beauty. So we'll start with it. So if you want to stand, you can stand, or you can still remain seated. So the first thing we're gonna think about thinking is we're gonna be thankful for our feet. They give us a foundation and grounding. So go ahead and inhale and lift the toes and lower the toes. Lift the toes, lower the toes. Now look at those feet. Sometimes they're painted, sometimes the ankles are a little swollen, but they're beautiful. They get us to go from place to place. Be grateful for them. Now place your hands on your hips. Move them around. Hips are our creative center. They help us create new things, learn things. This is our sacral area, our hips, our lower abdomen. Be thankful. Sometimes they're not exactly the way we want them to look, but the beauty in them is that's where we create and we can start learning new things. The next place we're going to start is our powerhouse. These are our solar plexus. So we can lean forward and lean upright. Inhale forward. Stand up straight. These solar plexus, this is our core. This gives us power in our walk. We might get tired, but we can engage this power center in our day-to-day routine, and we'll just activate that power center, and that will give us encouragement to be strong and keep going in our lives. Be grateful that we have this area of our body. Our next area is our chest, and so we'll open up our arms in a cactus on inhale. Exhale, close. Inhale, open. Exhale, close. Inhale, open. Exhale, close. This is our chest and our heart center. Our heart is our area where we show love for ourselves and our loved ones, our friends, our family, our community. So when we open up this area, we're opening up our heart and we're bringing energy to that area. Our next area to be thankful for is our voices. So that's our throat area. So we can bring the hands down, open up the collarbones. We'll inhale and look up, stretching out the throat. Exhale, return the head to upright. Inhale, looking up, expanding the throat and neck. Exhale, return. Inhale up. exhale down. So now our last place is going to be in between our eyebrows. So we'll bring our hands in our prayer pose and we'll put our thumbs in between the eyebrows. And we're going to rub them around in there. And we're going to be thankful for our brains that help us think and help us learn and help us socialize with people. We don't always think about our brain being beautiful, but our brain is so beautiful. Be grateful that we can learn. All righty. Now we got all of our areas, our energy centers of our body. We're going to end this with some affirmations. What I like to do is inhale and open the arms out to a T, and exhale, wrapping the arms around, lowering the head, exhaling, and you can repeat the affirmation after me. So let's inhale, open, exhale, close, and say, I am perfect just as I am. Inhale the arms open. Exhale them closed and say, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Inhale the arms open. Exhale them closed and say, I am beautiful. Alrighty, now bring those hands in front of the chest. I thank each and every one of you for allowing me to lead you through this little breath and breathing exercises. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you and namaste. Thank you for that. Those affirmations, these are things that we can practice in our daily lives. Thanks for teaching us those things. And for the shared experience for doing it with each of you. Great. We are going to move to our last segment, and our speaker is Tia Tomlin Harris. She is the CEO and founder of My Style Matters. She will be talking to us today about clean beauty matters. Let me tell you a little about Tia. She, I'm sure, will share a little bit of her story, but following a diagnosis of an aggressive form of breast cancer, or cancer, as she calls it, Tia vowed to God that if she made it through breast cancer, she would help as many women as she could fight and survive breast cancer. Again, this sounds familiar in today's theme, particularly Black women who are disproportionately impacted by this disease. Tia believed that no sister should walk this journey alone, and so she founded the My Breast Years Ahead Sisterhood. It's a sisterhood of women survivors. She also founded My Style Matters. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that focuses on improving health outcomes and overall well-being by providing support, resources, education, as well as healthy lifestyle experiences to cancer survivors and their loved ones. And Tia and I happen to have both of our nonprofits participate in the Black Women's Health Imperative Capacity Building Intensive, and I had the pleasure of spending a number of days with her this week while she was in Washington, D.C. In 2019, upon obtaining the news of a recurrence, Tia opted to fight cancer a second time with food and faith. She adopted a whole food, plant-based diet. We've had that on the show as well. And removed products containing toxins or other dangerous chemicals from her home. She also added other complementary practices to her daily routine, perhaps yoga. Tia believes that making a healthy lifestyle change can help improve one's quality of life and help with better life outcomes. And she's now helping others in their quest to do the same. She's an activist, an advocate, a cancer coach, a breast health educator, a consultant, and a project lead graduate of the National Breast Cancer Coalition. She'll tell us a little bit about Breast Health Matters, that's an education and empowerment platform, and we have the pleasure of having her present to us and interact with us today. Tia, welcome and tell us how you got motivated to get into the work that you do.
Awesome. Well, I'm actually going to speak about that. So I'm going to share my screen and then we will continue on. So let me get my screen up here. 1 second. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to be talking about clean beauty. And I like to call this Clean Beauty Matters. Well, to answer Laura's question, I became a breast cancer, what I call a statistic when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The statistic was just being female. The second, of course, being Black. The third, I was young. I was under the age of 40 when I was first diagnosed. And I found the lump myself by doing a self-breast exam. I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And unfortunately, I was told in 2019 that the cancer had come back. I'm doing great, thank God. But I just wanted to share that with you because my overall goal today, based on what I've learned and what I know about this disease, I've become an advocate, is my focus today is to help you to get educated, get motivated, and get activated. It's all about the awareness, but moving from awareness to empowerment to taking action. So I want to share a few things with you and ask you these questions. Did you know? And I love to do that. And feel free to respond if you want to in the chat. If I like a little bit of engagement. So if you know the information, use the emotions and give us a thumbs up. If you don't know it, give us a wild face using your emotions. So did you know that Black women spend twice as much on skincare than other non-Black women? And we have the highest toxic load. So did you know that products are often marketed to Black women that contain some of the worrisome ingredients? So a lot of the ingredients that are in the products specifically for Black women, unfortunately, we're marketed to, but the ingredients in those products are not clean products. When we look at regulatory, the European Union, or we call it the EU, they ban over 1,300 cosmetic ingredients, but only 11 were banned in the US. So that said something. And prior to recent laws that were passed in California, we did not have a major law that was passed by Congress that focused on cosmetic safety, ingredient safety, since 1938. Well, here's some other things. Out of 80,000 synthetic chemicals, only about 10% of those cosmetic ingredients have actually been evaluated for safety. And many of those ingredients, unfortunately, that have not been tested are endocrine disruptors, which we're going to talk about in a few, but they're carcinogens. We know them as carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals. When we look at women, and when we make that shift, we make a shift to going from those products that have all those harmful ingredients to products that are more natural and more clean. What they've seen was a 25 to 45% reduction of the chemicals actually found in the body once that shift was made. What we're also seeing, what scientists are also seeing, is that it's not only about the dosage, because sometimes we think about the dosage and how much we're being exposed to, but it's also about when we're being exposed, in times of our life, like prenatal development, during our childhood, puberty, pregnancy. Those are critical times that when we're exposed to these harmful chemicals, it can put us at a greater risk for breast cancer. So we hear this word, clean beauty. And what does clean beauty really mean? Well, for the industry and for people and consumers, really, we're the ones who came up with that. And what we said is we want beauty products that don't have all of these potentially harmful or toxic chemicals that can actually impact our health. This is what we've been saying. And so companies have heard our voices and they're now starting to create cleaner products. But what we need to know is there's no government agency that actually regulates the use of the word clean. This is actually, again, coming from us. So it's left up to interpretation, whether it's the brand, the dermatologist, the individual. But one thing I will say, what clean beauty is not, it is not greenwashing. And for those who may not be familiar with greenwashing, I'll give you an example. A lot of the products that we're seeing now, if you look at the packaging, some of the packaging have been changed. where the product may not have a lot of dyes in it. It looks clear. The bottle may be clear. It may have earthy looking packaging, or the labels may look green, or it may visibly look clean. And so what that does is it draws our eyes as the consumers to these products, but they may not necessarily be a clean product. And so we have to really think about this as we're, when we are looking at the products that we're purchasing. Again, it's important for us to know a little bit more about those products. So let's talk about toxins. So when we think about toxins, there's so many chemicals that we're exposed to on a regular basis, all day, every day. From the products we put in our hair, to the products we put on our skin, to even the air we breathe, the things that we get exposed to at work, our carpet in our homes, the paint in our homes, like we're exposed to so many toxins on a regular basis. And the important part to really understand about the toxins is our bodies really, with the amount of exposures that we're getting, our bodies can't release as fast as we're being exposed to them. This is why you're hearing, the new terminology or the new crave, everybody's talking about detoxing. Well, when we think about these toxic ingredients in our exposures, they can actually lead to other serious diseases, including things like allergies, weight gain, fertility problems, diabetes, breast cancer, and so much more. So I want to talk about one of the particular classes of these toxic chemicals, and that's endocrine disrupting chemicals. And what these are synthetic chemicals that act like estrogen in our bodies, and it affects our endocrine system or our hormone system. Now, where do we find these things at? We find these, we can find it in food. You hear a lot about the hormones that are being placed in some of the foods like chicken. We also can find it in our water. There's a great website you can go to really identify what's in your water, and it's by Environmental Working Group. So you can always go to ewg.org, and they have a place on their website, if you Google it, and it will tell you, you put in your zip code, what's in your water. Plastics, heavy metals, our personal care items, our cosmetics. So we can find these EDCs or endocrine disrupting chemicals or carcinogens in the products that we use. A big one that we may hear about is fragrance. Fragrance is in everything, from our skincare products to makeup, our lip balms to trash cans, trash bags. They're just in everything. And the problem with fragrance is we do not know the chemical makeup of most of these fragrances. And so therefore, it is deemed as something that is not so healthy when you don't know what's in that product. What we're looking for is really transparency. What are you putting in these products so we as consumers can make informed decisions? Another one that they're really trying to advocate around is what we call PFAS, or the forever chemicals, meaning these chemicals linger in our bodies pretty much forever, right? And they are known to cause problems with our health. Now, how do you know more about these chemicals? If you go to safecosmetics.org and you Google the red list, it's a list of chemicals that they have identified, and they have a specific database that they have created. It's a project that was recently launched, and it's focusing on Black women and Black beauty products. And so as part of this red list, they have actually carved out the products with for Black cosmetics. They have found the list of chemicals that we should be, as consumers who are using these Black cosmetics and personal care products, they have carved out a list of those red chemicals. And in that list, they've identified where those chemicals are typically found, whether it's our body care, our hair care, makeup, nail products, skincare, sunscreen. So at the end of this session, we'll make sure that you all get these resources. The other thing is, so now that we kind of know a little bit about those chemicals in the short amount of time that we have, the next thing is, how do you go about taking action? The biggest key here is know your ingredients. Again, taking a look at that red list. Learn how to read your product labels. One thing I will say, the higher up on the list, the higher the concentration is. So if you can see this particular label, water is first, and then you see glycerin. Typically, the things that are listed the first, in the first line or the first three items, those have the highest concentrations in that particular product. The other thing is, if you're not really familiar with these ingredients, and sometimes they can be difficult to pronounce, there are apps that you can actually download, and you can, and Clearia is one of the ones that I love. We've actually recently partnered with Clearia, and you can download these apps and snap a picture of the ingredients. And the system, using AI technology, will provide you with whether that product is clean or not. So this is a great, I call them the healthy living app. So it's Clearia, and you can download those. Another thing that you can do to take action is really take your products at home. I always say take the top 10 products that you use on a daily basis. And this is your homework assignment, and compare them to the red list. Look and see how many of those chemicals on the red list are actually in the products that you use on a daily basis. The other thing that you can do is reduce the number of products that you use and the frequency of use. So if you were a person that wear a full, I call it a beat face, every single day, maybe pull back. Instead of wearing makeup every single day, maybe just use some, mascara and a little bit of lipstick, but you don't have to put on a full face. Or maybe you say, you know what, maybe I'll just do a little bit, a few days a week, or do it on special events, special occasions. So reduce the frequency of how often you use those products. And a fun fact, or I call it a not so fun fact, is the average woman uses 12 products each and every day. And as you're sitting here listening to this presentation, I want you to think about how many products do you use a day, and feel free to post it in the chat. But the average woman uses 12 products. Think about it, from your soap to your deodorant, to your hair care products, to any makeup that you're putting on, to any perfumes, lotions, all of those things that we're using. And when you use about 12 products a day, it's exposing us to about 168 chemicals each and every day. So another thing that we can do is product swap. And what that is swapping out, once we've identified what's in our home, using the app Clearia, and you can go through your whole entire home and scan everything that you have, not only just your beauty products, but you can also scan like your personal care items, the cleaning solutions, detergents, all of those things that you typically use. Scan those products and swap them out. Swap all the dirty products out for something clean. And one thing I will say, there's another app called Think Dirty. There's another one called Detox Me, and they will tell you what's in those products, and they will also give you alternatives to those products. You can also, as you continue to swap out those things, swap out the dirty products for the clean products, I always tell people you can do it one or two ways, because it can be pretty pricey to just try to chuck everything right away. But you can start with the product that you use most, or the one that covers majority of the of your skin. And then you can also replenish your old or dirty products with the new clean products as you use them up. So let's say you still have a deodorant, I don't want to call out any brands, but let's say you're using a deodorant that may not be, one that's better suited for yourself. Well, when that deodorant is finished, go ahead and replenish it with something that's clean. So again, these are things that we can do. Now, I mentioned to you earlier what Safe Cosmetics has done. I sit on the Non-Toxic Black Beauty Project. I'm on the board, and they have created a database, and this is the first time anyone has ever done this, but it's a database of Black-owned and Black-founded companies that have products that are vetted, and these products are indeed deemed as clean products, okay? So I highly recommend, if you're interested, definitely go out to their database, and you can go to safecosmetics.org, and then just type in the Black Beauty Project, and everything, all kind of information will pop up around there. And then the last thing, or the next to last thing that you can do is, this is where advocacy comes into play. We've got to advocate. We've got to talk to our legislators and ask them to change these laws. Like I mentioned to you before, outside of California, which they're always leading when it comes to things like this, but outside of what California has done in the last 2 years, major laws have not been passed around the safety of the ingredients since 1938. So there is the Safer Beauty Bill package that have been introduced to Congress here recently. And it's really about making products safer for all of us, to make sure that we're, as a consumer, we can really, there's true transparency, that we know what's in those products so we can make the decision that is best for us. And then the other thing is they want to really reduce unsafe chemical exposures for the most vulnerable. And they're looking at those who are hairstylists and those who are they do nails, and I can't think of actually exactly what they call them right now. I'm having a chemo brain moment. But for the nail technicians and the hairstylists, they're actually looking at, because they are really, really exposed, even more so than just Black women. So they're really looking at to pass these laws, and it's 4 bills that's a part of the Safer Beauty Bill package. And again, they really want to make sure that there's transparency, not only for the consumer, but even for the business that is purchasing the raw ingredients. We need to have transparency. And so you can go to BCPP, which is Breast Cancer Prevention Partners.org/take action. And you can send a letter to your legislator saying, I want you to really consider the Safer Beauty Bill package to support it. And last thing before we wrap up, again, it's all about taking action. And I hope that today you will, what I do call commit to clean, #commit to clean, by sharing what you've learned today. One thing that you have learned today that you're going to implement after today's program. Feel free to post it on social media, share what you've learned on social media, tag us, share it with your friends. Because again, this information is not just for you, but it's information when we say, get motivated, get educated, get motivated, and get activated. It's really about you doing something, not only for yourself, but also for your community. Now, lastly, before we close out, if you all scan this QR code, and I'll post this link if you're not able to scan the code, and complete the questionnaire, we do have a gift that we will be providing you, and you will get it via email. And if you want to contact us, you can visit our website at breasthealthmatters.org. You can also send us an email at hello@breasthealthmatters.org. I want to thank you so much for inviting me, and I'll turn it back over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Tia. Wow, so much great information. I was copiously taking notes. I don't know if you can see me. We lost electricity for a minute here.
Okay.
And I'm back, thankfully. I will first open it up to questions for Tia.
Tia, could you do I know that when we're trying to balance the sunscreen to help us with the skin cancer and the cosmetics, and with melanated skin, it's hard to get a non-chemical based sunscreen because it gives us that ashy on our skin. Could you give some recommendations as to what to look for?
Yeah, so in terms of the sunscreen, one of the beauties about this database that they have built is these are Black-owned businesses that have created products specifically for our Black bodies. So I highly recommend that you, because everybody's body is different and all of us are a different shade, so different things work differently on us. But I highly recommend that you go onto the database and look for a sunscreen product. I know one of the things that I've used in the past, Thrive Cosmetics, they actually have a sunscreen. I personally don't typically put it all over my body. I probably should, but I'd like to get a little tan. But I do use their sunscreen on my face.
You said
and it,
Thrive?
Thrive Cosmetics. If you send me an email, I'll send you some.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was going to say, I did read up on like a protection when you get in a pool. So before you get in the swimming pool, there is like a natural thing that you can actually create, and it was with vitamin C. So I can send you, if you are interested, I can send you the recipe, and basically you're using vitamin C, a powder form of vitamin C that you can get at like a Sprouts or Whole Foods or what have you, and you can mix it with a like a distilled water and spray it on your body to protect your skin before you get in a pool from the chemicals. So you made me think about that when you were talking about sunscreen and thinking about us getting in pools and things of that nature this summer.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions for Tia? Great, Tia, that's great. That's fantastic. This is great information. I encourage all of us to take the actions that you've recommended for us for these tips. I certainly learned a lot. I didn't realize that there were, just so few chemicals that are regulated by the U.S. I did know that there was a difference, but didn't realize that disparity. I wonder, just connecting the panelists, whether there's a connection between some of these products and the endocrine carcinogens and the epigenetic factors of changing your RNA or DNA. I hope I have that right, Dr. Bethea.
Sorry, were you asking me or?
Yes, I was
Oh,
asking,
sorry.
based on what Tia has presented, have you seen any impact on RNA or DNA with chemicals?
So some of the chemicals that were mentioned, particularly heavy metals, can have epigenetic effects. Most research is DNA methylation. So they don't change the DNA itself, but change whether it's turned into proteins, turned into amino acids, which can affect health. For endocrine disrupting chemicals, especially PFAS, there's less data in human populations, but that's something that people are researching now. Given the chemical structure, which is kind of alluded to as it's likely, and we do know many endocrine disrupting chemicals are what's known as mutagenic and genotoxic. So in animal models, in cell models, they do have those effects. And it still remains to be seen if when those same chemicals, as was mentioned, are kind of in the cocktail that our products and our whole exposome, our whole life, if they are able to make the same effects. We're still learning about that, but it's possible, certainly.
Wow, thank you.
It's interesting you brought up that question, and this is not necessarily around epigenetics, but I sit on the board for Bench to Community, and they did a study last year where they looked at parabens on Black breast cancer cells, and they compared it to white breast cancer cells. And what they found is that those Black breast cancer cells were rapidly growing, way more than the white breast cancer cells. So there's something to this. And I know a lot of this is centered around the hormonal-based cancers, but they're also starting to really think about, okay, could this potentially also be with triple negative breast cancer? With the environmental exposures, especially being that, many of us who are diagnosed with breast cancer do not have a genetic mutation or a family history, or we're not at risk. So this is something that, researchers are still looking at when it comes to triple negative breast cancer, but it's just really interesting that their study showed that. And so when we think about the products that are being created for Black women, we are overexposed and underprotected. So it's important for us to get this information because we are marketed to. I don't know if you all remember back in the day, the perm boxes, had the little girls with the really pretty hair, and all of us as young girls were like, I want to look like the little girl in the box. Well, those young girls never even had a perm. And so again, we're being marketed to. So it's important that we continue to educate our sisters and brothers, because this is affecting us, and we know the disparity with breast cancer, and, with their, even in the LGBT, QI plus community, a lot of these products are being used by others, within the community. And so it's like, are we going to see an increased risk within that community as they continue to use the, hair care products, skin care products, makeup, and things of that nature? So these are things we really need to talk more about and think about.
Absolutely agree with that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We are coming to the end of our segment. Our time has been great here. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned some things as well. A few things I want to remind you of. There is a survey. Thank you, Dr. Bethea. I see your comment in the chat. There's a survey coming your way, so we want to make sure that we get feedback that helps us bring the programs like this to you and understand the impact that we're making. And so that survey, I think the link to that will be put in the chat. It will also be sent out afterwards. This was a recorded session, so we'll send out that the link to record the YouTube so that you could share this session with other folks. And then again, encourage you to complete the survey. We'd like to thank our sponsors, High Impact Partners, Myriad Genetics, Hologics, and the Vassar Center for BRCA. And now we've come to this part of our discussion where we're going to have the giveaway. And we have selected participants in advance based on the registration. And we have Bianca Vinson. Are you on? Okay, she was one of our selected participants to have a prize. We also have on the list is Andrea Bagwell. Are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Wow. Thank
Great.
you.
We'll send you a
Thank you
Touch
so much.
for Life certificate. Great. If you would send your information, send an email to hello@touchforlife.org. That's hello@touchforlife.org. We'll get your address and send you out your gift of your wellness gift.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a fabulous program.
Thank you. And I just want to remind you that our next month, we have these every fourth Saturday. Our next month, we will be coming to you live in July, the fourth Saturday in July. I think that's July 23rd or 22nd. Sorry, that's July 22nd. We'll be coming to you live from the Washington Convention Center in Washington, D.C., because Touch for Life will be at Ubiquitous Women's Expo. It's beauty and health for the Black woman. Please join us if you haven't signed up. If you're in the area, please join us. But we will be live, and our guests next month will be our friend, our sister, Ricky Fairley, who is the founder and CEO of Touch, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, as well as Haley Brown, her daughter, but who runs For the Love of My Girls, which is focused on young women. And so we will be doing a live interview on site in Washington, D.C. So don't forget to join us at that time. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful month. Until then. Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much. All right, great. Thank you so much. We will see you next month.